Hello students, I am Dr. College-Pimpri, Assistant Professor in English, Mahatma Phule Mahavidyalaya, Pimpri Pune. Today I would like to discuss with you English Special Course number 4, Introduction to Literary Criticism. And one of the first topics from the course, that is Classical Literary Criticism. And today let us try to concentrate on the first one topic, Plato's charges against poetry. I would like to just bring your attention to the point that Plato, like many other philosophers, desired to advocate the superiority of philosophers over poets. So here we understand that Plato was of the view that he had given more importance, weightage to philosophers than poets. Secondly, they attacked the poetry and criticized it on 4 grounds. First, moral, then emotional, intellectual, and utilitarian. Here, in the first place, let us try to understand it first clearly that Plato must not be misunderstood for the reason that he was not against poet or poetry as such. He was just composing his views on his idea of the republic, that is his concept or idea of ideal state, where he hadn't found poets' place in that particular thing. Let us try to concentrate on the first one type of his claims or charges against poetry, that is charges on moral grounds. First, Plato was of the view that poetry responds to popular beliefs. Here I would like you to just concentrate on the phrase popular beliefs. Now see that popular beliefs, he wanted to mean that the views or the beliefs which are not proven by the scientific method as such. So it means that poets are gullible to, tame to, believe in the things, the superstitions and like which are very much accepted by the common populace without proper scientific methodology. Second, poets presented false ideas about gods and heroes who represented gods. Gods were shown to be corrupt, immoral and dishonest in the epics that poets created. The epics that Plato had in his mind was the epic of Homer, obviously. Now the third charge, moral ground charge by Plato was that the likeness of dramatists for sensation and melodrama, who was responsible for inspiring the baser instincts of men, which in turn led to lawlessness. Again, the very last phrase here, the last term in this last charge, that lawlessness. It means that Plato just had the idea of his ideal state in his mind, where he hadn't found place to poets as such. That is what is a very much important aspect here. And in this way, his charges were recollected under the title moral grounds. Let us turn to the next category. It is emotional grounds. I mean, the Plato charges on poetry specifically categorized as emotional grounds. He objected to the claim that poets are divinely inspired. Those were the days where it was believed by one and all that poets are inspired, or they are having communication line with the divine entities as such. He believed that the views presented by the poets could not be explained even by themselves, since their views were non-rational. So you can just see, I think this particular charge has 2 sides to it, basically. Of course, yes, that he was against the poetry and poets as such, and he hadn't found them rational as such. But before that, I would like to bring your attention to the point that, see, understand, those were the days when it was before Christ, almost 400, 500 years before Christ. So So you can see, understand that even Plato, see the rationale, the very clear and very scientific sort of way of thinking was there, definitely. And that is why I always reiterate this point whenever I talk on this topic, that Plato must not be misunderstood. Because he was not against poet or poetry as such. He just claimed that, stressed the point that there is no place to poets in his concept of ideal state as such. The last one charge here under this category, he particularly condemned the forms of poetry other than lyric poetry. Now in modern time we know that there are different type of experiments in creative writing as well, in poetry, in drama, melodrama, everywhere. But those were the days where Plato had his own idea of poetry as such. Even literature was not the word there. All sort of writings or creative writings were used to be called as poetry as such. But beyond that, he didn't have any sort of respect for any other kind of way of writing. Now the third category is of intellectual grounds, the charges on intellectual grounds. Poets imitate only superficial appearances and had no knowledge of truth. So it was the belief or the very sort of strong adherence of Plato on his own rational thinking that poets do not have the very depth of thinking as such. They only treat the superficial appearances in their compositions, and they never go deep into the truth as such. The second charge, poets never understand the world beyond the senses, which was the world of ideal reality. Thus, they could not understand the concepts like beauty, truth and virtue. So you just can see that this is the sort of charge that Plato had on poets. The last one is charges against poetry on utilitarian grounds. The first, these are two that I have recollected here. Poets imitated things without understanding them fully. The imitation based on lack of knowledge, thus lacked purpose as well. So poetry was not useful. Again, we should go back to the very concept of his ideal state, where as far as according to Plato, poetry is just without use as such. The second charge is that he identified three arts in concern to all things: to use, to make, and to imitate. He considered the art of imitation to be least in value, and that is the art poets were concerned to. So there is absolutely no place, as equally as the poetry. There is no space absolutely in his idea to imitation, in his idea of ideal state. And that is what we are understanding now properly. Here, intentionally, I have brought a list of some recommended books which will be very much useful to you for not only for the classical literary criticism, but even for the neoclassical, the romantic criticism, modern criticism, postmodern criticism, and like. Here are these 9 books given there. The first, René Vallée and Austin Warren's Theory of Literature. I must remind you, or I would like to just strongly recommend you this book, because this is the Bible of literary criticism. I mean, irrespective of any language under the sky. So as a discipline, literary criticism, you have to just have your own copy of this book with you. The second is S.S. Butcher. Here, Butcher has been considered as an authority on T.S. Aristotle. The Aristotle's theory of poetry and fine art. Then the third is Ananda Kulkarni and then Ashok Chaskas, that we are very much familiar with these two names from University of Pune. An introduction to literary criticism and theory. And in this way, there are few more books that lastly comes to in all, that is 9 books are there that you must refer to. I intentionally explain the very bibliography in close detail with, because I know that the students belonging to undergraduate courses tend to just understand what their teachers say. it is a different thing when, as far as you are going to have your own thoughts or your own proper perception, understanding on literary criticism as such. You have to have your own views. You have to just refer yourself, your first-hand experience, to the critical concepts, to the critical textbooks, the critical reference books recommended for you. This is very much important. As far as this classical literary criticism is concerned, there could be the thought in your mind that, let's see, this is now the 21st century and these thinkers or philosophers belong to way back in 500 years before Christ. And why to study them today, at this time, in postmodern times? But see that such kind of thoughts or thinkers never lose their relevance in the field. As far as the ancient Greece is concerned, you have Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and likes as the father of so many modern disciplines that we find ourselves either belong to this one or that one. Since it is literary criticism as such, I strongly approve it or hail it that these thinkers are and will be relevant till the end of the discussion of this area as such, that is the area of literary criticism. Thank you very much, friends. Stay home, stay safe, stay strong.